everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, the overview of updates to Appendix A. I'm Valerie Briggs, RESNET Communications Director, and I am pleased to have to introduce to you all today our speakers. We have Charlie Hack, the VP of Technical Services with the North American Installation Manufacturers Association, or NAMA, and Robbie Schwartz, who is the Principal Thinker at Build Tank, Inc. Just so you know, housekeeping-wise, we are going to record today's presentation as always, and we're going to make access to the audio and a PDF of the slides available after. And then for Q&A, there is a questions feature in GoToMeeting. We encourage you to put your questions there as they come up. And then with whatever time we have left over from the presentation, we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And I believe Charlie and Robbie will provide their contact information should you want to ask some more questions offline. So with that, I'm going to pass to you, Charlie, to get started.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. This update's been a long time coming, and we're excited to share with you key components of the update and answer, at least get the answers started on some questions you might have on the proposed language. So with that, let's get to it today. Here's a short agenda of what we've got planned for today. First, I'll kick it off with a summary of what grading is currently worth in terms of HERS or ERI points, and we'll talk about the reasoning behind this update before describing the inclusive process that we undertook to draft the update. And then Robbie's going to talk about the key changes and preview some of the language that we've got in here that's out for review. And then we'll close it down with what we got planned for next steps to get the update finalized. And as Valerie noted, of course, we'll end with a Q&A, so should be a questions pane. You can submit your questions as we go along, as you think of them, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. We'll get through them all. So what is grading worth today? So insulation grading's been around since before the RESNET standard became an ANSI standard. Of course, it's designed to promote proper installation and value proper installation of insulation, and it gives you a penalty when the insulation is not installed properly. Now, I say penalty because in the RESNET standard, the rated home is designated as having grade 1 properly installed. So you can only lose points if the insulation is not installed properly. So what is it currently worth? Here's a study from a couple of years ago that did a sensitivity analysis across all the climate zones on going from grade 1 to grade 3. And in general, the penalty for not achieving grade 1 is a couple of points. Obviously, it's worth more in colder, heating-dominated climates because that temperature difference is higher and more energy is lost through the envelope. So I just wanted to do a quick grounding on how much insulation grading is worth and where we came from, and how it's a mechanism to promote proper installation. Now I want to talk more about why we're looking to update Appendix A. That's the section of the RESNET standard that includes insulation grading. Well, there are three main reasons that are driving this update. The first, there's interest in referencing the RESNET standard in I-codes. Second, an update will lend itself to better creation of guidance materials for raters. And then third, it would create better coordination between and overlap between the RESNET standard, ICC requirements, and manufacturer's instructions, and kind of serve as a single source that could be designed to cover all three. So for I-codes, we got the following comments when it was proposed in the 2021 code processes. It's too subjective, and all kinds of outside references. How is it different than manufacturer's instructions? Because it is, or currently is. And then the builders wanted to have something, I need to know what to do or not what to do. So this change that we're proposing makes the requirements more objective, designed to be self-contained, and as Robbie will talk about in his section, it's built around more yes or no language to the specific changes. Now, in terms of educational materials, Installation industry is committed to creating an informative guide that aligns with the requirements of the updated standard. In this format that we're proposing will make it much easier to create that guidance for each of the installation types. Item by item, we provide pictorial and additional informative language to the requirements. Things aren't subjective within this update. And then lastly, in terms of alignment, moving to a pass-fail, properly installed, not properly installed designation, along with language changes for the installation types, we'll bring it more into alignment with both manufacturer's instructions and ICC requirements. Like I said, that third point, bringing things more into alignment. All right, so those were the reasons that we had behind the changes that were being proposed. I want to provide you with a little bit of background on how we went about making these updates. So we put out a notice that we were making an update through RESNET and brought together raters, builders, and product manufacturers to draft the new sections. So we created subgroups that were focused on drafting requirements for each installation type. And we met monthly as an overall group to report out progress from each of those subgroups. So Robbie did a great job of creating some guiding principles for those subgroups to use as they formed their requirements. It really helped improve consistency between each of those sections. And of course, we tagged existing resources that I'll talk more about in a second here as guidance in creating each of those sections as well. So we had, in terms of makeup of the group, we had over 30 participants that consistently came to the meetings, builders, raters, energy efficiency organizations, installation representatives, and even ICC staff would consistently join. So it represents a pretty good cross-section of the industry. This standard that's being proposed was not written in a vacuum by one party, but was a collaborative effort. So I mentioned there were subgroups for each installation type. Here are the 6 subgroups that we formed, and you'll see these in the proposed standard. These were organized to be independent, self-contained sections for each of the installation types. So I mentioned that we had some guiding principles as well as we work through each of those sections. These are some of the key aspects of those guiding principles. Stress that normative language is to be used. We're going to save everything that's informative for the guide that we're creating. So if you have comments on something that's unclear or some more context could be provided, we would love that input because we could use that as we create the informative guide that will go along with the normative standard that's being updated right now. So yeah, if you have comments on something could be clearer, or if you have pictures from the fields and stuff, we'd love to engage with you to get that information into an informative guide. Second, we included specific sections within that on air barriers. And third, we discussed how the R value is determined for each of these products to ensure that we're not degrading the performance of the assembly twice. And then in terms of existing resources that we used, pulling together the updates of the source for manufacturing instructions, look to the California QII requirements, language within the IECC, and we used all these resources along with great input from all of the members of each of the groups. Information from the field from raters and builders, those all form the basis for this update. So now that I've given some background, I'm going to turn it over to Robbie to talk about some of the changes that we've got going on. So Robbie, you can just tell me when to move along and we'll get going.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. And before we jump in there, I just wanted to add 2 things with regards to rationale for going down this path of changing the grading standard. With gaining alignment with the code and the informative aspect of what can be achieved after this is approved, hopefully at some point in the future. If you look at the code, you see that primarily the energy code is looking at manufactured instructions for how you install insulation with some additional guidance within the code. And what we see with manufactured instructions is that they can't make an instruction that says install the insulation kind of good. It's either installed well or it's not installed well. And so to get that alignment with code and industry practices, it really makes sense to move to that kind of language. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to be focusing on language changes that are specific to ANSI 301. We also, the bulk of the how to look and evaluate insulation happens in Appendix A, but that side of the changes are pretty straightforward. So I really wanted to focus in on the changes that happen in Standard 301, so that we understand the impact on the modeling as well. So this first section introduces us to the notion of grading insulation. And in essence, it's a two-step process. If you just make a click there, it will do the animation here, Charlie. So, I'm sorry. The assessed R value is what we're trying to determine first. So what is the R value of the installation of the insulation in a particular assembly? Then you go about grading the insulation. And this is where we're introducing the terms properly installed and not properly installed to the standard, and moving away from the grading 1, 2, and 3 here. Also, there's some normative footnotes that have been added to that, and in this case, the R value entered into the energy model before grading of the insulation occurs. So again, trying to make it crystal clear that you have to determine the R value of the material in the assembly first, and then you grade it in terms of has it been properly installed or not properly installed. Next. This section is talking about insulation inspection, and again, the assessed R value shall be determined by, and it gives some examples of how you can determine the R value of the material. The manufactured label, and if we will have a footnote here that comes up in a little bit, if you hit the animation there. This is basically determining how you get the R value that you're starting with, that you're going to enter into the R value into the software before you begin the grading process. Next. The insulation and the energy rating reference home enclosure element shall be modeled as properly installed. So this is the guidance to the software about how the reference home is determined, and it shall be inspected in accordance with normative Appendix B and evaluated in accordance to normative Appendix A. So the inspection process in B is getting at, again, determining the R value of the material, and Appendix A is getting at how you actually grade it as properly installed or not properly installed. There have been some changes to both Appendix B. The primary changes in this move are to Appendix A. So, but you should look at both, look at the entirety of the proposal, that if you're going to make a comment, so you can comment on both. When insulation is confirmed to be present but not fully inspected, the insulation shall be modeled as not properly installed. This is consistent and with what we currently are doing. If you can't fully see the insulation, you can't make a determination of if it's been properly installed or not properly installed. So in the past, you would grade it as grade 3. Now we've replaced grade 3 with not properly installed. There are some exceptions that have been maintained, and you should look at those exceptions. Next. The insulation assessment section is talking about insulated surfaces categorized as properly installed shall be modeled with the assessed R value there. So again, getting at that notion that you're determining the R value of the assembly that you're going to model and enter into the software first, and then you're going to grade it as properly or not properly installed. The footnote here is talking about the R value entered into the software, so it's again a reminder what you're actually determining here, what the R value is and how it's going to be used. Next. Insulation surfaces categorized as not properly installed shall be modeled with the assessed R value that is determined in accordance with Appendix A for 90% of the insulated surface area and no insulation R value for 5% of the insulated surface area. So this is giving guidance to the software model for how to generate the actual energy model. It's consistent with what we're currently doing. However, in the past, you would use 95% of the insulated surface area and no insulation for 5% of the insulation surface area. So for not properly installed or grade 3. So this is a change. Charlie showed what looked like a climate zone map and the impact of insulation grading for R5, and you would see that when you're if you have a house and you modeled 100% of the installed insulation as properly installed or grade 1, and then remodeled the house with 100% of the insulation changed to being graded as grade 3 or not properly installed, that it does have an impact on the energy rating index score. However, that is very rare that 100% of the installed insulation is not properly installed. And so that's one reason why the working group was okay with moving to from 5% to 10%. And the other reason is that the majority of ratings that are out there have, when you look at the rating registry, are modeled as grade 1 currently, which is an indication to me that insulation is being installed, potentially inspected, failing an inspection, and then getting re-inspected and modeled at grade 1 there. So in this case, you're going to have very few circumstances where 100% of the insulation is going to be modeled at 10% derate in essence of its R value there versus the old system of 5% there. But if you do come across those situations for existing homes and whatnot, then it will make a bigger impact than it did in the past, and we just want to make sure that you're aware of that. The appendix or the footnote that's associated with here is trying to ensure that we get proper modeling here. So areas of the assembly shall not be modeled separately solely based on insulation grading, which means that, can someone mute their mic there? Which basically is getting Can we go to the next slide? There we go. This section is talking about insulation surfaces categorized as uninsulated shall be modeled in with an R value of 0, which is pretty straightforward there. Insulation grading should not be applied to this section because you're already entering it as not insulated. You don't need to grade that install there. So that's consistent really with what we're doing currently. Next slide. The modeling guidance here that is offered is consistent with what's currently in the standard for other building assembly materials. Basically are getting their R values through the ASHRAE Handbook of Fundamentals there. Next slide. Same with insulated wood framed enclosure elements, cavity insulation, continuous insulation, the framing of cavity paths and enclosure elements. These are other areas of assemblies that have to be modeled, and the modeling guidance really hasn't changed for these assemblies. Next slide. However, there is fibrous batt insulation where the industry has created compression charts. So we needed to make it clear that for this specific insulation type, if for example, you have an R19 batt and you put it into a nominal 2x6 wall, you have to compress that batt by about ½ an inch, and it changes its R value from 19 to 18. And therefore you would have an adjusted performance R value where you have a different R value that you would actually input into the software before you would begin your grading process there. So fibrous batt insulation is unique in that way, that when you compress it, it changes the R value, and there are compression charts that are available out there from the industry. So we wanted to make sure that it's crystal clear that, again, you're getting you're assessing the R value first, and then you're grading that installation there. So there's two different things that are happening, so that you're in essence not impacting the software twice. You want to make sure you get the right R value, and then the impact on the software in terms of grading happens through the nomenclature of properly installed or not properly installed. Next slide. Areas of an assembly having different insulation types, orientation, or R value shall be modeled separately. So again, you're not modeling assemblies separately or breaking out areas of an assembled, or like a wall assembly, you're not breaking out it separately. Just because it's graded separately, it also has to have different insulation types, orientation, R values. All those different things have to be assessed in order to break out into a separate entry and to grade it differently there. Steel framed walls and ceilings obviously are significantly different, so those would be assessed by the software differently as well. Okay, back to you, Charlie.
All right, so plan next steps we have here. So this proposed standard change is out for comment now on RESNET's website. It is out for comment through the 14th of October. Look forward to your comments. Even if you have comments that are not changes, we would love to hear from you and engage with you on getting good content for that informative guide that will be created after the completion of this standard. Just given the quantity of comments we expect, I think it will go through multiple comment periods. So we'll respond to those comments. Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll do it, maybe early next year. We'll have the next comment period going, and we can finalize this here in 2025. And then, as I mentioned, we want to create that informative guide. So the insulation industry is interested in leading the effort to create that resource for graders. We want to have things be very clear and concise within that. So we would really like your engagement on that, the development of that as well. With that, that's all we had to present today. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, fellas, so much. I apologize. We did have a moment of lost audio with Robbie talking earlier. So if anyone has some questions about that content, type it in the questions box, please, so we can go back to that and make sure everyone got the full content of that slide. Let's see. We're going through to see if there are any current questions to ask. Hold on a second. Can you give more information on the thermographic exception? With current 301 appendix, you can go from grade 3 to grade 2, but not to grade 1.
Yeah, there is still an exception that's allowed with thermography, but it's more from the perspective of assessing the R value of the material than the grading of the material. But you definitely would want to, if you have a concern about that, you definitely want to look for that section. It's in the ANSI 301 section of the proposal, not in the Appendix A part.
Okay. Another question of, is Energy Star planning to follow the standard? Or are you in communication with them on these changes?
Well, Energy Star already requires that all insulation be grade 1. So it would be just a simple switch over to properly installed versus grade 1. So we expect that there shouldn't be an issue with them from that perspective. They do, in certain cases, allow grade 2 insulation, and we just don't know yet, I guess.
Okay. And my apologies. I think we had the audio outage around slide 24. Robbie, can you go back to that? Make sure everyone knows what was said on that slide.
This is basically modeling guidance for the layered pathways of the assemblies that are modeled in homes. So you get your cavity insulation R value, for example, and then the other components of the assemblies, you would get the R values through the ASHRAE Book of Fundamentals.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that, folks, for losing that earlier. Another question, does the thermal exception require level 2 certification?
Yes, none of that has changed.
How do you anticipate the standard being applied to off-site construction, i.e. panelized construction with blown-in dense pack insulation?
That part of the standard hasn't changed either. There's still off-site inspection protocols that would have to take place, and you're just grading the installs with properly and not properly installed versus grade 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. We have a question about when this is expected to go into effect.
Well, our objective is to try and incorporate these changes into the ANSI 301-25 version of the ANSI standard. But with the way that RESNET works and the Minhur standards, there is a possibility that the grading schema could be incorporated into Radar's flow of work before the standard is actually out and used.
Okay.
Everyone, I mean, but everyone would be given plenty of notice, you know, for that.
I'm sorry, we're jumping around here a bit. There's a question about, does that mean the modeling separate assemblies for above grade walls with the same insulation type and grading, but different orientation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is density testing required for any bone and wall insulation types?
Not specifically by the standard, but if you look at the 2021 ICC in Chapter 3, where it talks about insulation that's installed without an R value mark, it's now requiring that the installer provide a certification of the R value of the material and certificate, but immediately after the installation of the material, which doesn't also require specifically density testing, but basically puts the onus of the R value designation for that particular install squarely on the installer. So hopefully we will start seeing some QA of their installs using density testing and not, but specifically for this standard, no.
Okay. See, another, hold on a second. Got a lot of activity here. How frequently are raters required to perform density tests?
Raters are not required to perform density tests.
And is there a chance that this that things won't change, basically?
Is there a chance? Can you say that again?
Well, I think the question is there a chance that there won't be any changes based on, I guess, supposedly the comments from this amendment?
I guess there might be a chance if 100% of the comments were, say, don't change. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't really know.
Laurel, could you chime in?
Essentially, if there's 100%, essentially, you're right. Robbie nailed it. If there's 100% of the people that say don't change this, but I think, you know, the consensus process that they've done on the back end of this before public comment and bringing everybody together, I think that there's going to be support for this. So yeah, there's always a chance for something like that, but I don't think it's a great one.
Next, we have, how will thermographic inspection work for determining R value? Will RESNET accept a PO from the installation installer for a 2x6 wall? How will we determine if it's R19 or R21?
Well, they're in Appendix A, and through the inspection process in Appendix B, that determines how you figure out and assess the R value of the installation that's been installed there. There is still inclusion of a thermographic process in there, but it's not super in depth. So I'm not sure I could answer it, but I would direct you to those sections of the proposal so that you can make a public comment and hopefully make it better if it's not meeting your needs.
Absolutely. That's kind of the purpose of all this discussion, so we appreciate that. Someone has a question regarding orientation. Are you meaning location? Her software doesn't ask for solar orientation for walls, for example, only fenestration.
No, I think it is talking specifically about orientation, so that when you're assessing the different assemblies, if you're seeing that that there's a difference that is including the wall, let's talk about wall assemblies. If I have a wall on the right side of the house versus the left side of the house, that would be part of your assessment of the installation of the insulation there. And if the R value is significantly different, maybe they even use different material on the left side and the right side of the house, then you would be allowed to break it out as a separate entry there and grade it differently.
Okay, let's see what else is coming in. When you talk about the insulation industry, are we talking about the SEF rating from the American Chemistry Council? I think I'm reading that right. Laurel, can you help me out with that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. When we talk about the insulation industry, it's all manufacturers of different types of insulation there. So that would include spray foam, that would include rigid foams or rigid materials, fibrous materials.
And reflectives as well.
Reflectives as well.
All the different manufacturers of those materials.
Yeah, all the manufacturers were included as reference points, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. What is the reasoning behind having separate wall entries for different orientations? Graders have enough issues modeling walls as is. This could be increasing the likelihood of mistakes being made. Any thoughts on that?
There's no requirement to make entries for different orientations of the house for walls, for example. What the guidance is when you are allowed to make a separate entry. So the guidance is saying you need to evaluate more than just the insulation grading. You have to also evaluate the orientation of the assembly, basically the consistency of the install. And if that consistency changes per orientation and affects the R value, affects the other things, then there's guidance for when you would make a separate entry. It's the standard isn't saying that you have to make separate entries. It's saying when you should and when you shouldn't make separate entries, in essence. So I don't know how detailed I should go, but for example, when I enter a house, I always enter if I have a perfectly square house, I always enter front, right, back, left. Just so that I know that I've gotten all the square footage and whatnot. I can still do that, but when I'm grading it, if I have different R values and whatnot, I might break it out even in more depth than that. And you're allowed to do that, but you can't break out entries just based off of grading the insulation. There has to be other reasons for breaking it out into smaller entries.
Okay, someone was recommending alternate language for that. That orientation in hers is a solar orientation, north facing, east facing, etc., and having to assign each fenestration item to that. Understand what you're saying, but I think to say each verification is documented, tell the team where to find the assembly.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great comment that you could make in the public comment process there, but I think that you want to be sure that I explained it correctly and that you understand what you're reading correctly before you make the comment, because it's likely that I didn't articulate what the standard is trying to say well enough for people to understand it, or you specifically to understand it. So, but that's what this public comment process is about. If you can make your voice heard by making a public comment.
Absolutely. What do you see as the true benefit of the change? Grade 1 seems properly installed currently.
So again, to Charlie's points, the objective is to have better alignment with the ICC, to have better alignment with manufactured installation instructions. Again, manufacturers can't tell people to install insulation kind of well. It's either installed well or it's not. And then the ability to build off of this standard and create a really meaningful, informative guide with pictorial examples of properly installed insulation, and to help the industry as a whole do better.
I think that might be the last of the questions right now. Did you all have any, Charlie or Robbie, any closing comments?
I don't think so, other than submit your comments before the deadline. Definitely interested in hearing from you. So go to the RESNET website, look at the standards that are currently for comment, and I'll bring up the site right now.
I would agree with that, and just also say that this standard is, almost every sentence in this standard is open for comment. So this is the really the ideal time to make a public comment. When it goes out for its second comment, which I'm sure it will, only those things that have changed from this version will be open for public comment. So this is really the ideal time to get involved.
That's an excellent point, Robbie. You took the words out of my mouth, because right now it's all on the table. Usually we say underline and strike out, and those are the things you can make your voice heard on. But this whole entire standard is available for everybody from all industry to make their voice heard.
So when you go to the site, look for this Addendum D update, and it will be right here. You can review the standard and submit your comment.
Yes, set a calendar reminder for October the 14th so that you don't forget to put in your comments.
Yeah. The other thing I think we should state is that when you're making comments, you need to also offer alternative language. Just making a comment that says I like this or I don't like this doesn't do anything for anybody there. So if you're going to make a comment, make your comment meaningful and actually propose something.
Excellent point.
Agreed. Thank you.
Looks like we have one last one before we close. Any requirements for an air impermeable material, like what's required on the unconditioned side of skylight shaft?
Yes, that's addressed in the standard.
With that, we can wrap things up a little bit early, give you guys back some of your time. I want to thank Charlie and Robbie so much for joining us today and going through this presentation and asking these questions. Again, as they have articulated, this is a consensus process, open for public comment. So we encourage you to share some of the questions and comments you had here today if you still have questions and have, as Robbie said, alternate suggestions for how those standards should move forward. Thank you all so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Charlie, Valerie, and Laurel. Take care.
Thank you.